This is what I've always found interesting about the City fans in this. I hear what LB's saying, and LB could be right, and I'm being as objective as I can be. The one element I don't get about City is they say that this is to protect the cartel clubs. I'm like, bro, you're part of that gang. You're acting like you're not, but you're there in the sense of you say you're innocent, which means you've built this squad organically. It's new ownerships, like City, Newcastle.
But that's right though. But again, that's not right though, is it?
It is, and it isn't. And I stand by what I've said all along about FFP. I think City are an outlier. I think Man City are an outlier where their owners have come in. Whether you like what Man City's owners stand for in terms of what their rules and laws within their nation, that's another conversation that I'm not personally having on the terrace. In terms of how they've run Man City, if they are innocent, which they are until they're proven guilty, they have run the club impeccably well. No one has stated that more often than me, and I stand by it. There's been so many multi-millionaire and billionaire owners of clubs, though, that have run clubs awfully. And the problem that you have, if you just allow endless, bottomless spending without checks and balances, I think we could see a vat of football clubs across Europe and the UK go out of business. And I think there has to be something in place to protect it. I think we've spoken about it before. I think City's owners would do this, where you turn around and go, right, whatever your exposure, so money that you owe over a 5 to 10 year period, say it's 4 billion quid, you've got to put 4 billion pound into a pot of cash that sits there, that can't be touched by you ever again, that protects your club in case anything happens, your country's sanctioned, the owner passes away, rules change, whatever it may be. That you get no moaning from me, because then the club is protected. My whole argument is we have to protect these clubs. I just shudder to think that all these poor owners and the further debts that some of these clubs would have been in, had they been able for the last decade to spend whatever they wanted to, offer out whatever contracts they want. There has to be checks and balances. Equally, I think that there is room to allow clubs to spend more money as long as the club's being protected. So I think there is right and wrong on both sides in these arguments. Personally, I think that owners should be able to pump money into a football club. My thing is the money should be not everlasting, but there should be enough there to protect them in case somebody pulls away.
I agree with that. But on this subject matter that's broken today, the question is, should a random third party be able to tell another company what they're allowed, what they can spend on a sponsorship deal? Is that right?
Yes.
I don't. Why?
To a degree. So
if you want to sponsor Football Terrace, right? You want to put it on a billboard, right? And the billboard company says 100 quid a day. But you get them told you're not allowed to spend 100 quid a day because it's not worth it, so you can't do it. Is that right? Okay. They're not allowed to sponsor football. It
depends. It depends on the laws, and that's why this case is going to be really interesting, because there are competition laws, but they work on multiple levels. There's only so much amount of advertising and money that's allowed to be spent by big companies, for instance, in multiple industries. Like they can't have a monopoly on the system. So competition laws work on every level. So the reason why I say yes, I'm going to caveat it though with context. If there's no rules in place for how much owners can pump into their football club, then you don't need a third party. If clubs can spend whatever they want, their owners can put in whatever they want, you wouldn't need a third party, because your club wouldn't be getting an extortionate sponsorship deal from a company that doesn't make any products. Your owner would just pump the money in. So you wouldn't need it. The reason it's needed is because the Premier League and UEFA and FIFA believe, it isn't just City, that clubs are getting sponsorship deals that are being backfilled by their ownership. So they have an independent sort of adjudicator or valuer that looks at it and says, well, this company turns over X amount of money. City's fan base is this size. It's a 5-year deal. How comes it's worth 400% more than Real Madrid's most recent deal? I think we should live in a world where there is that type of regulation to make sure that, and I'm not just talking about what City are being accused of. We have to make sure that football clubs are not being used to launder money. And this happens in all walks of life where big money is involved. Look at just having the Standard Charter. Turns out they've been doing a lot of bad things because the regulators haven't done a good enough job looking after what they're doing. It looks like they've been processing loads of money for exceedingly bad people. And I think that there has to be checks and balances. I'm not looking at this purely through the lens of Manchester City. I'm looking at it at large. We have to ensure there is not bribery. We have to make sure there isn't blackmail. We have to make sure there isn't money laundering. in the sport at large. But that independent company that's being used, they have to be reputable, they have to be fair, they have to be independent. So I do think there's room for those individuals if you have a rule that states the deals have to be within market value and owners can't pump in whatever they want to have in the game. I think you have to have someone to do it. Otherwise, you've got a rule that can't be measured.
Okay, but let me I need to pull you up on that though. So let's just use, I don't know, let's use Sky as an example. Right? Say Sky wanted to sponsor Man United, yeah? And Sky wanted to give Man United £100 million a year. And this third party says, nope, that's too much, it's only worth 60. Who are they to tell Sky what they're allowed to spend on this? But it's Sky's money. If Sky want to put the money in, they want to sponsor Man United. Who is this random company to say?
But they're not a random company. It isn't John from down the pub who's been sent up there to give his
nothing to do with Sky. Who are they to tell Sky that they can't spend money on it?
It'll be to do with experts within that industry. Okay, so it's no different to having health and safety turn up on a building site. They're trained and they understand what they're looking for. They're there to make sure that the building is being built within the regulations of the country or the state of which they're being built in. So these will be highly qualified individuals. There are reasons that you need it if there are rules in place. If there's no rules, if there's no laws, then I agree with you. But if you're going to have a rule and the Premier League clubs have voted that things have got to be within market value, you've got to have an independent adjudicator because you don't want the Premier League assessing it, as an example. But at the same time, for me, this isn't about Sky or Nike offering far too much money. All the independent major companies that do the shirt sponsors, the manufacturers, none of these companies are being accused. All the people being accused are companies that are sponsoring City, say £10 million, don't have offices, don't have employees, don't sell products, don't offer services, but yet they're pumping £10 million in. That question there needs to be answered. So that for me is why this is how it reads to me on the outside. That's why those, they don't want an independent person digging into those sponsorship deals. And this could get even techier for clubs that don't want any independence. The government want to be the actual regulators of this, where you can have the government snooping around what's going on. And at the end of the day, you do one or two things. I think you bring in your own regulators, or the government's going to do it. One of the two. When you're talking about billions and billions of pounds, that money, whether football fans won't like hearing this, but you can't just let that money circulate willy-nilly without checks and balances, because that is when forget City's situation. I'm talking football at large. That is when you get what happened with Blatter and all those guys, because you just can't allow that amount of money to be passing around without nobody regulating it at any level, because you will get mass corruption at every single level of the game, internationally as well. There has to be regulators. There has to be.
Well, the question is it legal? Is what the Premier League's doing legal? I mean, we're going to find out. So that's what I said at the start of the stream. We'll find out in 2 weeks whether this is legal. City are saying, who is the Premier League or the independent company to tell another company what they can spend on sponsor? And it's a very, very reasonable question. I put it to you there with Sky and United. If Sky wanted to spend 100 million on sponsor and they said, no, that's too much, it's only, who are they to tell another company what they can and can't spend on? It's a very reasonable question. Now, you've just made your argument as to why they should be able to do that. I think that, I'm not saying, by the way, people in the chat saying, like, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I don't give a fuck. I'm just saying.
LB's question is absolutely spot on, and it's absolutely right that he's asking that question. My pushback on it is I don't think Sky would overpay. I don't think Nike would overpay. I don't think in fairness, Chevrolet slightly overpaid Man United, and 2 weeks after the deal was done, the guy that signed it off was fired by Chevrolet instantly because they couldn't believe, and that was 40 million a year, which isn't even considered excessive within football. This argument really boils down to the fact that there are companies sponsoring particular football clubs that are organizations who don't do anything, don't make any money, don't have any staff, and the question is, how can they afford to sponsor it? What is the upside for them? And you may answer the upside is they're getting millions of viewers and they're growing as a business. But I think football has to ensure, absolutely has to ensure it knows where the money is coming from, that is coming into the sport, and where it's going. We are not talking about thousands or even millions anymore. We are talking about multiple billions of pounds moving from one part of the world to the other part of the world. And I'm talking all countries here. This is not specific to City. there has to be an idea of who and what and why and where this money is coming from. Otherwise, you can end up in the same situation the Standard Charter have just found themselves in.
Well, exactly. I don't even necessarily disagree with what you just said there. Otherwise, you could have sponsors that support terrorism. We don't want that in the Premier League, yeah? But the question that I ask is, and this is what City are asking, and it's a very fair question. And if you can't even accept that it's a fair question, then you are biased. Is it fair for a third party to tell another company, not City, another company in a different country, what they can spend on a sponsorship? Is that legal? Do they have the legal right to do that? We're going to find out in 2 weeks.
We certainly
legal rights. City don't reckon they do, so we'll find out in it. But
we certainly are. Viewers, look, give us your thoughts, give us your feelings. It's a really interesting debate. Keep it nice and polite, though, people, and no getting mad attacking the panelists, each other in the comments section, because none of us have the answers. We've all got opinions, how things read, how things feel. That's why the court case is going to be amazing. FFP is against anti-competition law. I mean, but it is and it isn't. Again, it's interpreted. That's why the law is great, because there are elements of competition that stop the bigger and bigger organizations and wealthy organizations having a monopoly. So I swear that's why Sky TV tried to buy Man United and were told no. So it works in both directions. IFRS and USGAAP only allow for related party transactions to be done at market price, prevents discounted or inflated financials. The problem is related parties. How can you prove it's like who they are? Well, this is, again, I can only look at this from when I used to work in banking. You would, especially when, depending on what nation the person was from, you have to do due diligence. And then you had to sometimes do what they called advanced due diligence on an individual. And there were times where you would have to ask for information from previous banks, previous employers. There was a guy that came to work in the UK once, I won't say from what nation, and the volume of documentation we had to get from his current employer and his old employer. And it was like, why did you employ him? What is his skill set? Why are you paying him so much money? The bank had to do that because the regulator said we had to do it. So that's maybe what a lot of these clubs don't want, is people digging into their finances. But my question is why? You know, and that's not a City question. That's a larger question for football clubs. It would depend on United. If United owns Sky, you know what I mean, LB. Your face is telling me everything. Just watch this back yourself alone.
Jesus, man.
Sky is a business. They wouldn't overpay in the market. I agree. I personally agree with that. Who sponsors need to be regulated, not how much.
Well, apparently Chelsea are looking at this as well, because Infinite, who sponsor Chelsea, two investors, Todd Bowley and some other guy, are invested in Infinite.
You had Paramount. They were stopped. The Premier League stopped them from being sponsored by Paramount as well. I can't quite remember why. That might have something to do with the fact that Paramount in different countries show the Premier League. The company will be auditors such as PwC. Also, if City are able to spend crazy amounts, other clubs would have to raise prices for fans to compete. Fair point. If there is concrete evidence, can't clubs past and present having played during the period in question come together and sue City for damages? Listen, that has been a conversation that's been had many times. I think that's a conversation that we have if and when you're found guilty, because like I said, but they can be found guilty, but it only amounts to £5 million, and then that's a drop in the ocean. If they're found guilty,
remember as well, guys. This isn't what we're discussing today in terms of these. This is a separate thing. What City are suing the Premier League for next week is nothing to do with the 115. It's these associated party transactions. The 115 is in November.
Do you think, though, LB, that it could be? Do you think that it could be?
No, all the football all the finance experts on Twitter say it's nothing to do with it. Separate.
Okay, but my point is, if they are, then, so what I'm saying is, and I'm not sure if this is the case, none of us are, but if this comes out that they are saying this law, is this right, and it comes back to say, yeah, there's nothing wrong, and then it comes out that's why Man City were worried about that, because look, that's going to be linked to 115.
Yeah, I mean, I get
That's
what
what
the
I'm
financial.
thinking. I don't know.
Yeah, I get what the financial experts are saying. I would love to hear what legal experts have got to say, whether this is a bit of a prelude and a shot across the bow. But we'll see. This here says Man City sue. What happened to the EPL if they win? This is the irony. They sue the EPL, they win. EPL shuts down. They've got no league to play in. Everyone loses. Yeah, I mean, all they're doing it for is they're suing to get the rule changed. That's what it's. They're not trying to hurt the Premier League per se. They want the rule changed. I get it. If Man City gets away with all these charges, that will open the door for all clubs to start doing exactly the same thing as City have done.
Well,
I mean,
depends what City have done. Depends what City have done, though.
Yeah,
that's on that. Yeah, but on that basis, Stephen, you're just saying that City are definitely guilty, and that's obviously again separate to what we're discussing here. But like, this is the thing: it's a lot of people. There's just no way City are innocent in people's eyes.
It's what I find really interesting about it. Genuinely, is the sort of, this is how I think some clubs might feel if City are guilty. They might sit there and if they're found innocent, but it looks like they did it, but they're found innocent. There'll be clubs maybe sitting there going, why didn't we just do that? Why didn't we do it? There'll be an element of I followed the rules and I didn't need to. So listen, we have to wait for the verdicts on both these separate hearings before we start to talk like that, I think. Loads of reports of top City players being linked with leaving. Pretty much obvious that Pep is going to be leaving all within a month. Ha ha ha. Nervy is what Jack says here.